Good evening, everyone. So glad to see you here for our inaugural data science edition of DoubleTake. My name is Emma Condelier. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communication, and I am so honored to introduce this inaugural event here at the school and introduce tonight's storytellers. A little bit about DoubleTake. DoubleTake was initiated by President Jim Ryan when he was Dean at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And believing in the power of storytelling, particularly in higher education, he brought it with him to UVA when he became president and actually held the first event in 2018 during his inauguration weekend. DoubleTake is about storytelling. It is about community coming together, people telling their personal and unique experiences and sharing personal stories in order to build connection across the community. And so we are thrilled to have the Data Science Edition here. President Ryan last fall reached out to all the deans of the schools and offered an incentive for them to host their own version of DoubleTake. And of course, our own dean, Phil Bourne, said absolutely, and then gave it to Jen and me and was like, you go organize it. So here we are tonight. We are thrilled to be the first school at UVA to actually host their own version of DoubleTake. And we hand-selected all of these wonderful storytellers that you're going to hear this evening. There are 7 of them, and we wanted to make sure that they represented our entire community. So they include faculty, staff, students, and alumni. And they are, in program order this evening, Prince Afriyie, who is Associate Professor of Data Science, Rebecca Schmidt, Director of Belonging Operations and Strategy, Mason Nicoletti, who is a BS in Data Science student, graduating in 2027, Jade Preston, a PhD candidate, Phil Bourne, our very own dean, Matt Dakolios, who is an alum of the MS in Data Science program, graduating in 2021, and Courtney Hodge, MS in Data Science, graduating this spring. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker and hand it off to Prince.
I don't have to sit down, right? I think I might just walk. So I'm a statistician by trade. So my story today is about randomness and a little bit about probability, but specifically as it relates to my life and my journey. So I'll start off by telling a little bit about where I grew up, how I grew up a little bit. So I grew up in a small town located in Ghana, in the southeastern part of Ghana. Unlike the big cities in Ghana, my town was pretty rural. So for example, I did not grow up with running water or electricity. Growing up, my mom would wake us up at 4 a.m. every day. And my first chore that I have to do was to fetch water. Anybody know about fetching water? So I had a big bucket. I walked maybe a mile to a well, get some water, come back, and then maybe do it a few times, just so depending on how much water we needed for the home. After fetching water, I would help my mom make breakfast. We eat breakfast, and then I'll sweep the whole compound. Think about raking all the leaves in the compound. It's a dirt compound. And then I had to be at school at 7 a.m. So that is how I grew up almost every day, every weekday. My father is a businessman in Ghana. So he was always traveling for the most part, just to work and then support the family. His highest level of education was actually middle school. But for some reason, he really cared about education. And so he supported all of us that wanted to go to school. And I have a lot of step siblings that I would not get into. So that's a little bit about my dad. My mom, who is probably the most influential person in my life, also happened to be the strongest woman alive today. Did all the hard work and raised 3 of us. There was 3 boys. I was the oldest. I'm actually at a stage in my life now that I can relate a little bit because I have 2 kids, a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. But every time I played in my head, how did she do it? Raise all 3 of us to be where we are today in those times, in those circumstances. I don't know how she did it. I know one of her good metrics of measuring how good of a parent she was she wanted to make sure that we were safe, and every parent can relate to that. And so she took it a little extreme, though. She would not let us play sports. For those of you who are familiar with Ghana culture, we play soccer all day, every day. but she thinks that if we play sports, we will get injured. So she's like, no, and then she also did a probability, and she's like, what are the chances that you make it to the Ghanaian national team, which is 24 players out of 30 million? And she's like, that is very negligible. I'm not going to push you that way. So she was really our rock. So I went on to go to high school. It was 8 hours away from home in a boarding school. And every time I had to take any major exams, I could always hear her voice. You got this. You are the smartest. Go get them. Her words actually stay with me even today in most of my endeavors. I always hear her voice, even when she's like 6,500 miles away from where I am today. So with that background, you're probably thinking, what are the chances that I'm standing here today? Well, inside that big picture of randomness and improbability, there's a very random and pivotal decision I made along my journey. And I'll tell you more about it. So based on my mom's or my parents' guidance, and also my middle school math teacher, who's probably one of my most influential people as well, he actually got me interested in mathematics. But based on their guidance, I was a good student at school. I made it to the top university in Ghana called Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. I was a math major. In my third year in college, I was looking at programs about traveling abroad to study for maybe 3 months and go back home. I applied to a lot of them, different countries, but I got the visa to come to the United States. It was my top choice. Everybody traveling abroad in Ghana wanted to come to America, so I made it. So I was like, yeah. So I arrived here in June, this is very vivid, June 11th, 2004. That's when I first arrived in the United States. I could already tell that I was in a different part of the universe because it was 8:30 p.m. and the sun was still bright out there. And I'm like, that's pretty bizarre because in Ghana, all day, every day, the sun sets at 6 p.m. So that was a very, but anyway, I went on from there, and through the program, I was working at an amusement park in Wildwood, New Jersey. I know a few of you are from New Jersey. And my first job was basically taking pictures of people coming on the boardwalk, and then I found a second job. So for this second job, I'll go to the job, they would suit me up, they'd give me a big helmet, and then they give me a shield. I was a paintball target. So I just move around and people shoot me. But it was one of the funnest jobs I've ever had because you don't ever get to do that in any life situation. So I did that. I met a lot of people through the program. I met students from Russia, Bulgaria, Nigeria, all over the world. So it was a very, very fun experience. Now, it was the day before I left to Ghana. And so I'm packing up my stuff and I'm like, you need to show people in Ghana when you go back that you were in the United States. So maybe I'll go shopping. So I went to the mall and I bought the fanciest sneakers. I remember I bought a flip phone, a Samsung flip phone that you can clip to your belt. Anybody know what I'm talking about? In those times, that's what pinnacle of technology. But whilst I was at the mall shopping, I ran into a guy that I was on the airplane with. Now, this is completely random. I didn't know this guy in Ghana. He went to a different university, different town, but he would just happen to be on the same airplane with me. And so I ran to him. I'm like, yo, I'm leaving tomorrow. We're on the same airplane. Are we going back together? And he's like, no, actually, I'm not going back. I've decided to transfer my credit to Northern Kentucky University. And I'm like, oh, you could do that? And he's like, yeah, I can. I've already talked to the international office. They're going to transfer my visa. I'm just going. And there, I was like, can I come with you? And he's like, okay. And that is how random, but yet a most pivotal decision, because my plan originally was to go back home, and in the controlled environment, I was probably going to finish my undergrad, maybe go to grad school, because I always had a dream to be a teacher, but I might also work for my dad or maybe start my own business. But all of that was off the table. The 5 years after making that random decision was probably the most challenging in my life. Every day in that 5 years, I regretted deeply to make that random call. So imagine new country, no friends, no family, some college education that nobody even know the college, and I find myself in Kentucky. So that was very, very difficult. But at the same time, I gained so much inspiration in those times that sometimes I look back and I'm like, where did you get that inspiration from? I gained that so much inspiration that I was able to work really, really hard. You know, there's a saying that if you really want to find yourself, you need to get lost. That's exactly what I had to do. I was working 80-hour-a-week job, working as a nurse's aide in nursing homes in Cincinnati, Ohio, whilst enrolled in full-time classes. I actually ended up dropping out of college for a little bit. It took me a combined 8 years to finish my undergraduate education. It was crazy. But today, I have no regrets of making that random decision. Because of that random decision, I met my wife in the way. We have 2 amazing kids. In fact, I stand here today because of that random decision that I made. I get to live my dream of becoming a teacher one day, and I get to do that at one of the most prestigious universities in the country. I get to be part of, and I get to help build programs at the first school of data science in the country. So yes, I have no regrets. Thank you.
Okay, smooth transition there. Way to go, Prince. I'm Rebecca. Great to be with you all tonight. And I thought a lot about what story I wanted to tell. That was the hardest part of tonight, especially in this moment that we're in this year. And I thought about stories of adventure, romance, lots of silly stories. But I decided that I wanted to tell a story about a time when I felt powerless and what happened. So, as you can tell by my title, Belonging, I enjoy digging into topics that are a little uncomfortable for people and just hanging out there. And this is going to talk about one of those topics. Just a little preparation there. But when I was in my young and anxious dating years, there were no algorithms for what type of partner you should have. So I asked my dad, because that's what we did back then, without algorithms. And he said, you should find someone who is kind and just, someone who shares your sense of humor, and I have a special sense of humor, as you can tell, and someone who likes himself. And I really thought that last one was critical for everything else. So it took a lot of trips to Ireland, some wandering around a very humid Virginia wedding. But yeah, I found a great partner. And we wandered around for a while. We did the career things. We went to Atlanta, West Virginia, London, all over the place. And we finally actually settled in West Virginia for a bit. And we thought, now's the time. Great. We're just going to go off birth control and have a baby because it's time. We're going to do that. And I'm a planner. I enjoy planning. I enjoy solutions. And I enjoy a little control over my life, have this great illusion over that. So it was exciting, terrifying, and we waited, and there was no baby. So, doing the thing that people do, we decided, okay, we'll go to the doctor, get checked out, make sure everything's okay, and we were fine. There are no problems. So we thought, okay, great. Good thing is that there's always advice, right? So that's helpful sometimes. So we drank lots of tea. We tried not to be stressed. That's always great advice. Just don't stress, and it'll be fine. Get lots of rest. Don't think about it. And we tried all of that. One of the next steps, of course, is to go to the next doctor, because there's always a next one. And so this next doctor, Dr. G, was a total character. We walked into his office, and he said, he just started talking about his wife and how fit she was and like the vacations they'd been on. It was very weird. But after that first visit, he said, you know, I'm not worried about this. You're going to walk out of here with a healthy baby. Don't worry. And we said, okay, thanks. He was very confident. And so we went through lots of invasive and painful things over the next couple of years. And he finally called us into his office, and he said, this isn't going to work, right? We talk about probability. And it was brutal, but I appreciated the honesty, and I appreciated that there was some kind of resolution in that. And then, you know, he talked to us about sperm and egg donation, and he talked to us about adoption. And then he talked to us about something that really surprised me. He talked to us about love and kinship. And he said, you know, most of the couples that get in here, usually the guy really does not want a child who is not a biological child. They worry about being able to love them and connect with them. But I always tell people that you find your partner and you're not related to them. And you choose to love them. And it works. And so I took that with me and kind of sat with it. And of course, during this whole time, we were getting really helpful feedback from lots of strangers. And, you know, I was thinking back on this time and thinking, I probably say a lot of these things too. I've probably said horribly awkward things to people, right? Like, you know, I know my cousin Marjorie, they just stopped trying and then they adopted and then they had twins. You know, you'll be fine. Or, you know, have you really prayed about it? Have you really just sat with it? Or, you know, you're getting older. It gets harder as you get older, which, you know, is really great. And then the worst one in retrospect was your life is going to be incomplete without children. Who's going to take care of you when you're older? And that's always really bothered me because when I think about my family now, I think about all the aunties, because I have lots of them, and all of the people I'm not related to, and all the different ways that we come into contact with each other as family. And I also think about family as not a neutral word for lots of folks, right? But I think about kinship. So we got that news. We went to see family in Ireland, and I wandered around in the barren hills and looked off the cliffs, and it was all very comforting because I felt tiny and kind of insignificant, and like, you know, there are bigger things. There are children without parents. And so we came back and we looked at the options, and we saw this billboard for foster care, and I was like, not sure what that is. Let's do some research because I like to research. And we talked about it, and because I married a really brave guy, we said, all right, you know what? We don't have control over this. We are totally powerless. But one thing we can do is help support some kids who don't have caregivers right now. And so we went on this adventure. And it's been totally messy and uncomfortable and a lot of work. But what it's taught me is that sometimes when you feel empty, if you give something, it actually fills you up, right? And, you know, we have 3 little girls now, and they are so loved by so many people, by all of their family. And it's just kind of a patchwork, right? Like all of our families are. And so I just want to highlight that when we feel powerless, we still have choice, right? And I think I looked today, there are probably about 100,000 kids waiting for a home in the US and about 300,000 kids in care every year. And I don't say that to say everyone should be a foster parent, but I do say that because I'm surrounded by data scientists and probably historians and maybe some physicians, definitely some people who are active in the community and really care about impact. And there are lots of ways that we can get involved. So I just want to leave you with that and turn it over to our next speaker.
Hey everyone, I'm Mason again. I'm in the bachelor's program, so excited to be here in data science. And I'm going to tell you a story, hopefully entertaining, about coming to college and getting involved in something unexpected. So I feel like one of the most common cliches people hear before coming to college is that, it's a time to explore your passions, try new things, get involved, study hard, but have fun. I feel like all of my relatives told me that exact same thing. So I really took try new things. I really took that to heart. So as many of you know, UVA holds the activities fair the day before classes start. And this is where all the clubs at UVA, they set up tables, and as a student you can just walk around, see what all of the clubs are, see what you're interested in. And like UVA is known for having a ridiculous number of clubs. There's like 700 or 800 or something. It's insane. And when I go to the club fair, I go there to like see everyone. I don't skip any. That's just how my personality is. I just want to see everyone. So I'm making my way around the club fair. It's rows of tables. It's really crowded. It's a hot day in late August. And these two guys approach me. And they come up to me, and I noticed them going up to other guys, pretty much any guy who was, decently tall. And they come up to me, introduce themselves real quick, and they immediately go into their elevator pitch. And they're like, "Do you like to play sports?" I'm like, "Yeah, I play some sports." "Do you like to work out?" "Yeah, I work out." And then they say, "Well, you're going to want to know about the rowing team." And they go on a spiel about the club rowing team at UVA. I've never rowed before. I've never imagined myself rowing either, but I listen to what they have to say. And at the end of the conversation, they tell me that rowing tryouts are actually tomorrow. So they move fast. But yeah, I walk away from that conversation. I'm like, I'm not going to rowing tryouts. I don't know anything about rowing. But one thing you'll learn about me is that I have a hard time saying no to things. So the next day was actually the first day of classes. And, I do all my classes, get done in the afternoon, and just this thought pops up in the back of my head, like, rowing trials. Rowing trials are today. And for no good reason in particular, pretty much just out of curiosity, I decide to go. So I show up to rowing trials that afternoon, not really knowing what to expect. They were surprisingly fast. We get in, and the coaches start off with a quick lesson on how to row. For all the guys who have never rowed before, because I wasn't the only amateur that they recruited the day before. And they had us line up on the ergs. So these are the machines that, to give a demonstration, you sit on it, it slides back and forth, and as you're going back and forth, you're pulling, simulate the rowing motion. It's basically like the treadmill of rowing. So after the quick lesson, they had us do a 500-meter evaluation. This is what we were being tried on. This was the time portion of it. And I'll be honest with y'all, it was not my best tryout. So what happened was, I'm rowing, and I feel like I get in a pretty good groove, and then all of a sudden, I don't know if I got excited or something, but all of a sudden I just fly backwards out of my seat. Next thing I know, I'm on the ground. I scramble back up, get back in the seat, strap back in, and get back to rowing, but yeah, I lost a few good seconds there. And it probably looked ridiculous too, so yeah, it was not my best tryout, I'll say that. But not that I cared though, I didn't really want to join the rowing team, no big deal. I just grabbed my free t-shirt on the way out and called it a day, that was all. Well, the next day comes around, and I don't know, all day I was just kind of bothered by tryouts from the day before. It was just nagging at me the whole day, the fact that I fell out of my seat, because not only just because of how ridiculous it was, 'cause I knew I could do better too. And then I remembered this small detail that they were holding makeup day of tryouts that day. It was meant to be optional if you had already went, pretty much for the people who couldn't make it to the first one, give them an option to try out. But optional was all I needed, and guess where I was that afternoon? I was back at Slaughter Gym, back for rowing tryouts, day 2. So yeah, it was same deal with tryouts. It was pretty quick, and I do much better this time. I don't fall off the chair. But yeah, I was pumped up with my time. I was like, oh yeah, it's a much better time for a team I still have no intention of making. And yeah, I'm sure the coaches must have thought I was crazy too, because I'm pretty sure I was the only guy who showed up for the second day who was actually there for the first. So they're like, ooh, this guy's back again. Must be dedicated, yeah. But it didn't take much longer for them to get back with the results from tryouts. And believe it or not, I was offered a position on the team. And I thought about it for a minute or so, just to be fair, but then decided that I don't really want to do rowing. I just didn't think it would be a good fit for me because it was a huge time commitment. And I have a lot of respect for the guys on the rowing team. It's a lot of hard work, and it was just not something I wanted to stick with for my 4 years at college. So I was just going to go to practice tomorrow, tell the coach that I'm not going to row. That was my plan. Simple plan, right? Sounds like it should be simple. But we'll see how that goes. So I go to practice the next day, and afterwards I get a moment with the coach, and I tell him, I'm not so sure about doing rowing, and he urges me to give it more of a chance, and then the next thing he says to me just completely sets me up. He's like, by the way, practice tomorrow, we're going to the boathouse. And I'm like, oh, boathouse? I've never been to a boathouse before. Yeah, coach, I'll come. That sounds interesting. So just like that, the next day, there I was, carpooling with the rowing team bright and early to the boathouse. Just digging the hole I was in, deeper and deeper. And I will say this, it was an amazing experience getting out in the water. I had a lot of fun. And I go to practice the next day. And after going to practice that whole next week, I realized I need to get it together before I'm stuck on this team. And I've dug the hole too deep that I can't get out. So that final practice, I finally asked to have a word with the coach. And I tell him that I did really appreciate the experience I had rowing, but I'm not going to continue on the rowing team. So that was hard because that was a hard situation because I just prolonged it so long that I was starting to feel like I belonged on the team. I was starting to feel a level of commitment, and that's not what I wanted. I just wanted to try something, and I ended up getting a little too deep. But I will say I learned an important lesson from this. I had to say no to something for once, and I had to stand up for myself, which is something I had not really been good at before. And because of that, I found myself in this situation with the rowing team, as well as other situations in my life. So I can say that was definitely an interesting way to start college, something I had not expected in the least, getting acquainted with the rowers. But it was a lot of fun, and that is the exact thing that I've loved about college so much so far, is that there's always these new experiences to get involved in. There's something new every day, and every day I've found something new to push myself, something new to try. Like you said, Prince, my goal is to live life without regrets, And the rowing team definitely wasn't a regret. I mean, that was an awesome experience. That was something I'll remember forever. So I'll strive to keep looking for these experiences that continue to push me and that continue to fulfill my life. Thank you.
Sure. It's me next? Okay, good. Hi, I'm Jade Preston. Thank you for inviting me. So I guess I'll just start off with discussing how I became, maybe you guys don't all know this, I'm an active duty Air Force officer. And so my story is about how I kind of got on that track. Not everybody knows how you can become an officer, but there's a couple of ways, and the one way that I did was I did Air Force ROTC, which stands for the Reserve Officer Training Corps. And what it really just means is that I did my officer training as an undergrad at a university. And so when I started undergrad, probably a few years ago, I won't say how long, but when I started undergrad, I decided to go to Mary Baldwin University. Some of you might know where that is, but it's about an hour, maybe hour and a half away from here. But I chose Mary Baldwin because it was inexpensive and because they had an ROTC program that I loved. And so the first week of classes was fantastic until Friday came around and I had my first ROTC class. And unbeknownst to all the freshman cadets, you have to do a height and weight standardized test, which means they weigh you and based off of your height, you have to meet a certain weight requirement. And so before I took my first Air Force class, they told me that I was 20 pounds over the weight requirement, and I was not allowed to be, training with the cadets, and I was not going to be able to commission. And of course, that was devastating because that's why I went to Mary Baldwin. Anyways, so I took the Air Force, or I ended up doing the Air Force class that day and then going home and to my dorm room and crying about it with my mom and saying, hey, I made a terrible mistake. I could have gone anywhere else. And I decided to come here. And so she was like, you know, you made a grown-up decision, so you need to kind of pursue that path or be okay with, you know, a different path. So the next day, I went to the athletic trainer at Mary Baldwin. His name is Charlie. And Charlie said something that I never forget. It really made me mad when he said it, but he said, Jade, obesity is not a permanent condition, and you can recover from it. And okay, so he gave me a weight loss plan and a workout regimen. And so I don't know, have I said the words PT yet? It just means physical training. So he gave me a PT regimen to follow religiously, and he said, you can come back weekly, and I'll reweigh you. So I did. I also continued to go to Air Force class because they told me that even though I couldn't PT with the commissioning cadets, I could still attend the Air Force class. I don't know why they said that, but I did. I went there every single week, and I did Air Force ROTC class, even though I couldn't PT with the cadets. But I did Charlie's weight loss and food regimen while I was doing class. And so every week I went and I talked to the ROTC instructor. Her name is Captain Jackson. And I don't know if we became friends or just kind of like, she just enjoyed my company, but I used to tell her about my dreams of becoming a contracted cadet. You know, I want to commission, and I want to major in computer science. I want to do all these things. And she said, hey, you know, Jade, whenever you're ready, I will reweigh you. So in November, maybe like mid-November, I said, hey, bring your scale. I think I'm ready. And she's like, okay. So the following week, she brought her scale, and I'm like, you know, kind of geared up, but still nervous because I was like right on the cusp of being, you know, in and out. And so I talked to my roommate about it, and she's like, well, you could just take a laxative. So I took one that morning, but it didn't work. All during the day, it never worked. So it didn't matter. After class, she weighed me, and I was like 2 pounds over. I mean, under 2 pounds under. And so she's like, "Congratulations! I'm going to do the paperwork. You are now a contracted or a commissioning track cadet." And I was like, "Oh wow, thank you so much." And she's like, "But by the way, I'm actually giving a PT test, a physical training test, to another one of your fellow cadets. Why don't you just take it with her?" And so it made me nervous because I hadn't been training with them. I'd just been doing Charlie's regiment. And so I was kind of nervous, but I didn't want to say no, so I just did. And so she's like, "Great, don't worry, you don't really have to pass. I'm just going to put something on the papers, just something to put down." And so I started, there's 3 parts to the Air Force test. That's the push-ups, the sit-ups, and then there's a run. And so surprisingly, I got the max score on my push-ups and my sit-ups. And so Captain Jackson was like, "Woohoo, all you have to do is just pass the run, Jay. You don't have to, get crazy here. Like, just trail after this other cadet. She's got like 3 inches on you. Just make sure you don't get too far away from, the other cadet." Her name was Cadet Ramdas. And so that's what I did. Like, for the first mile of the run, I just didn't let there be too much space between us. I just picked it up. And then the last bit of the run, I just hardened it out. But that's when the laxative started working. And I don't want to get too nasty here, but that's the fastest run I've done in my life. So I'm running, and I finally passed by Captain Jackson, and she's like, "Wow, great job, you've done it." But I ran right past her, went straight to the bathroom. And then when I came back out, she was just, hugging me and saying, "Thank you, you did such a great job." And I was like, "Oh, wow, I'm so happy." And I mean, I was very proud of myself, but I think that I think I gained an amount of respect from her, because I don't think that she thought that not only was I going to meet this height and weight regiment, but I was actually fit, because by the Air Force standard on that day, I had met the excellent standard, because there's there's tiers, there's pass. It's 75 and below. You had to meet at least a 75 in order to pass. And then if you make a 90, that's considered excellent. And I made a 92 that day. And so, mind you, I was like, wow. I knew how I did it. You guys know how I did it. But anyways, so fast forward 2 more months. January, we get back from the holidays, and we have a on-track or commissioning cadet award ceremony. And they selected 6 out of 75 freshman cadets for a full Air Force ROTC scholarship for tuition and room and board for the next 3.5 years. And I was one of the 6 cadets. I don't know how I thought that may have been possible, but I went from being somebody that was not considered a commissioning track cadet to somebody who was definitely going to commission into the Air Force, but then do it in style. I didn't pay for any bit of the rest of my undergrad. And I got to call my parents that day and say, "Hey, undergrad's paid for." And obviously they were like, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" So anyways, and I know that there was a lot of cadets at the time that believed that, maybe they should have been picked. And maybe they should have. There's only a few scholarships to go around, but, I think that of people who show the perseverance and the drive, I think there should be some room for, another person to get a scholarship. Anyways, well, thank you.
Thank you for those lovely stories. I'm Phil. I'm going to tell you a story of the moment, which is really a tragedy, because that's the moment we're in. But from that kind of moment comes something very special. So my story begins with an Amtrak train trip. Who's been on an Amtrak train? Just about everybody. You wouldn't want to have been on the train I'm just about to tell you about. So my darling wife, who's sitting over here of many years, we won't say how many, Roma, and I having not been married very long, decided to take a trip from New York to Montreal for the weekend on the train that was called the Montrealer. And we set out from Penn Station, and we had a wonderful time, a wonderful evening. We were in the car with having a couple of drinks and something to eat, talking to the conductor, talking to various people who were all excited about their weekend in Montreal. And then we went to sleep in our little sleepers. As it turned out, I, as usual, had booked the trip very late. So I couldn't actually get two sleepers together in the same compartment. So we had two sleepers. And so if this is the front of the train where you are, I was here, and Roma was back here on the other side of the aisle in her own little sleeper. And we had a pretty lousy night. I mean, trying to sleep on a train is not easy. And then around 6:50 in the morning, a.m., Saturday morning, the 6th of July, 1984? The train came around a bend at 59 miles an hour, and Howard, the conductor, not the conductor, the engineer, suddenly noticed that the track was there, but the underlying embankment had gone. And so what happened is the two engines of the train went across the gap, derailed, one caught fire. Obviously this we learnt later, not at the time. One caught fire. The baggage car went down, partly way down the ravine, and then we, in the first sleeper car, went down the ravine. And so we went from being just totally bounced around. You can imagine as the carriage rolled over and over and over, we went up and down, up and down, up and down, hitting the ceiling, the floor, the ceiling, the floor. And then suddenly it stopped. Total silence. And all I remember at the time was not the pain. In fact, there wasn't any pain. The shock set in almost straight away. But what I remember is the absolute silence that was there, and the smell. There was a smell of diesel fuel and like brake fluid, hydraulic fluid. And then we could hear screaming. I was actually trapped into, there's a happy ending here, trust me. I was trapped into an area literally exactly the size of my body. I could move my right foot about 2 or 3 inches one way or another. Otherwise, I was completely compressed in a metal cocoon. But because of the nature of where we ended up, I was down here, Roma was up here, and the carriage that came on top of us, she could actually look out, so that it crushed down on top of me, but she could actually look out the window and see the bogie, the huge wheel of the carriage on top of us. And as a result of that, a couple of miraculous things happened, actually. It turned out the National Guard were going out on maneuvers, and they were only a few miles away. So they immediately came to help the situation. And also, they brought in a crane from, a special crane with Jaws of Life, and all the rest of it, from the University of Vermont, and immediately started to work on the train. So Roma, within an hour or so, was lifted out and taken to Burlington, into the hospital there. And I was there for 6-7 hours, completely locked into this cocoon. And for all that time, I didn't really think very much about dying. I actually thought, yeah, I've had a pretty good, I was only in my 30s. I've had a pretty good life, you know, and I don't know, somehow all of it didn't register. I don't know, some parts of your brain just shut off. When it did register is finally I could hear the crack of tortured metal as the Jaws of Life approached me, and suddenly there was a gush of air on my feet. At that point, I sort of panicked, because I thought I actually could be saved. And so, and they were very nice. This is where the human spirit just comes in. The people that helped us were just so wonderful. I'll say more about that in a second. And so slowly but surely they were trying to break me free. And the guys said, well, they knew who I was because they'd found a newspaper that my mother used to send me. This was the old days where they used to send newspapers by mail, and it had Dr. Bourne on it. And so they're going, Dr. Bourne, is that you in that? Yes, this is me. And they said, we can't really get you out very easily. We're going to have to pull the mattress out that you're lying on. So when they pulled the mattress out, because we'd gone over and over, shards of glass had got between me and the mattress. So when they pulled the mattress out, I had a nice set of scars all the way down my chest. But they finally got me out. They strapped me to a board, and I'm not light now, I wasn't light then. 6 of them lifted me up a very large embankment and put me in a helicopter and took me into the hospital. Cutting a long story short, associated with catheters and various other things, I was finally wheeled up to the room. Roma had already been told at some point that her husband, George, Carl, whatever his name was okay. And she said, well, that's very nice, but my husband is Phil. And finally, Phil shows up, and they basically wheeled our beds together, and they allowed us to touch hands. And even then, the care staff, the nurses, started crying themselves. It was really an amazing moment. At the end of the day, 5 people were killed. All the people around me and us were killed. 150 or so were injured out of 287. So it was really, in many ways, a tragedy. We went back a year later. We spent time with the nurses and that helped us, and other folks in Burlington, Vermont, all of whom were actually wonderful. The spirit that people showed us was just the human spirit. I will just never get over it. It was just truly amazing. What's the moral of this story beyond that? The moral is when Prince or another faculty member or anyone else, one of the students, who are very nice, by the way, but get on my nerves, or there's something going wrong, and there's some pressure, there's something that drives me nuts in the school, I just think to myself, I survived that train. This is nothing. This is absolutely nothing. And it's really carried me forward and carried us both forward our whole life to really just appreciate what it is. Yes, there's all sorts of guilt that creep in from time to time, that you survived and others didn't. But that really just means that you need to do something very special as you can with your life. And we've really tried to do that. Thank you.
I'm going to sit down because I'm tired. My name is Matt. I'm a 2021 graduate of the online master's program here. I'm really glad I get to follow our dean because my story is about my feelings of inadequacy, so this will be really helpful. I think the term imposter syndrome gets thrown out a lot and gets overused. But I will say that when I entered the program, we did a 4-hour fun little data boot camp, and I was Googling what else can I do with a math background, because this, I didn't have a coding background at all. I came from 10 years as a full-time math teacher, 5 years as a high school administrator, and here we are, and I'm sitting there, and I'm in a room with my friend Derek, who's a white hat hacker, and people who are already senior data scientists, and I'm thinking, what am I doing? And the first semester actually was okay because one of our 2 classes was statistics, and I was an AP stats teacher, which was a massive blessing because I got to help people, which in return they helped me with every single other class the rest of the way. But I really hit a wall in the second semester, and I saw a couple of my classmates have to switch from 2 classes to 1 class. one class. It was a really tough semester, and I had to have a really, I don't know if I can do this meeting with the head of our program and my success coach. It was, it was the first time in my life where I didn't think my effort was good enough. I didn't think that I could work hard enough at this because I didn't think I was capable. I think I can say that I was really good at what I did before I went into data science. I was a high school math teacher. I had won state teacher of the year. I was an athletic director in my 20s. And this was a huge change for me. It was a huge shift. And I had the never ending support of my family, and I had 2 young kids. And I should mention my wife, Tara, who I met at UVA, and she, in her first year, tried out for the women's basketball team and got cut, and then came out the second year and made the team as a walk-on and went on to be a 2-time captain. And so this is someone that knew what hard work was more than anyone I know. And she could see that I was struggling, and she could see that I was putting everything I had into it. And it just, it was the first time where I said, I don't know that I can just give everything I can and it will be enough. And so in that meeting, it was pretty simple. They just said, I think you just need a tutor. I think you need help. And after that, a peer tutoring program was started. I'm sure hugely to help me through. And Travis was my tutor. He was a game changer for me because he helped take all my balled up effort and just point it in a really positive direction. I was lucky enough to find really, really good classmates, particularly my classmates, Sood, Edward, Paul, Jay. We had a really good group. Again, I don't know. They just think that because I helped them with stats that I just okay, we're going to help you the rest of the way. And that worked out for me. But it was, it was those moments of acknowledging that, hey, I'm really struggling and being okay with getting help. And I really got okay with saying, hey, I need help with this, which was huge for me. And even then, though, it was scary because even if I graduate, is this all going to be worth it? I was it was a pretty huge financial commitment, obviously, to do a master's program. And I was in education. And so it was scary. And I was lucky enough before I graduated to get a job as a junior data scientist at Crutchfield. Since then, I have moved over to the Jefferson Scholars Foundation here at UVA. And one of the coolest things I've been able to do is I partner with Adam Tashman, who's a professor here. And we are working, we created a high school data science class that I teach at the Covenant School in Charlottesville. So I think that once I realized I don't have to go work as a principal data scientist at Google or Netflix, I can find my own path and be really successful in that way. Started as an entry-level position, and I've really prioritized in my work finding organizations that are extremely supportive, that can be patient, that will help me grow, and that can see who I can be and not, hey, does this guy have 3 years working as a data scientist coding for 50 hours a week? And so once I became content with that and not realizing that I had to be where everybody else in my program was, that was a game changer for me. And I think for me, I had to realize there's that tricky combination of contentment and ambition. And can you find that? Can you be ambitious and try to fulfill your own potential, but being content with your own path and not looking around at my friends who are incredible coders and saying, man, I feel incompetent around these people when they are telling me, hey, you're helping us, you're great, we love working with you. And coming to terms with that was huge. And so realizing that I can accept help, I can say, hey, this is a struggle for me, I don't understand this. I don't understand this assignment, let's work on it. That was huge. And I was able to certainly take in and accept more aid than I can ever repay. And it was a huge blessing for me, and I made it through and can say that I can call myself and I can feel okay saying that I've been successful, certainly in my own way. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Courtney Hodge. I just want to ask if we all can give a round of applause to all the speakers who've presented so far. So my story is about my two heroes, my mom and my dad. They both served a combined 50 years in the United States Air Force. My mom, thank you. My mom served 23 and a half years, and she enlisted in Waco, Texas in 1989. And my dad served 26 and a half years, and he enlisted in Brooklyn, New York in 1982. And my mom became a commissioned officer in 1999 after having my brother. They both met in Alamogordo, New Mexico in 91, and they also married. And then they had my brother in 98, and then me in 02. And I've had, of course, my fair share of deployments as a military brat with serving overseas. The most exotic place that we've been stationed at was Ramstein, Germany, and we were there for 3 years. I was between the ages of 6 and 9 years old, and a couple of the most drastic changes from the States were not seeing yellow buses pick us up and take us home. They were unmarked charter buses, which was very fancy. But I remember when I was about 6 in first grade, they would round us all up after school. They'd put our name tags around our necks and our IDs on the opposite side to make sure that we were where we were supposed to be and who we were. For the first couple of years, we lived off base, which was very nice. We lived in a small German village, and every morning, kind of going on the way to school, there would be sweet bread in the nearby bakery that you can smell through the car. And then in the spring times, there would be the most vivid tulip fields you'd ever see, with yellow and just pink shouting at you. And you can just go and cut your own tulips and then bring them home. And then we also traveled a lot. Being fortunate enough to be stationed in Germany allowed us to travel to Italy, Greece, not Spain or England, but Switzerland, to name a few. And with some deployments, of course, my dad, he deployed to Japan when I was young, my mom to Qatar, and then my mom again to Afghanistan when I was about 7 years old. And me being young, I thought, well, I can't really stop her, but the one thing that I can do is give her a piece of home. And this is Lucky. He was one of my stuffed animals. I named him Lucky because I thought he was very lucky. And he went and protected her while she was in Afghanistan for 9 months. So, Dad had to take over for Mom for a couple of months. And the number one, after school snack that he would give us was a bag of chips and soda. So you can imagine that, I gained a lot of weight, but that's okay. I was a kid. And we listened to the type of music he listened to. So I know the Beatles like the back of my hands. I know the Eagles. I know all the 70 genres. And that's the type of music I also still listen to today. It calms me down. When Skype was still a thing, we would Skype my mom once a week for as long as she was there. And it was a nice way to kind of connect with her, tell her how our days were at school and what she was doing for work, which, she kind of kept on the low. But I remember vividly, there was one Skype that we were on, and I was just talking with her. Things were going normal, and I remember just the flip switched off or on in her head. She went sort of in like a military demeanor and said, "I have to go, bye." And apparently there had been a non-drill procedure in the background that they had to, call the military people to work. So I didn't know what was going on. I was still very young, and that was kind of the first time that I knew my childhood is not like many kids' childhood. And I honestly was kind of fearful. I didn't know if she would come back home. That's sort of the thoughts that run in your mind. Is she safe? will she be okay? And I have my stuffed animal there, so I thought there was a little bit of hope in that she would come home, and she did. But truth be told, many families do not have that sort of homecoming experience. But I remember the day that she came back, I was sobbing. They didn't let any kids back to inside the facility where they were coming out of, but they let me back because it had been a very long time since I had seen my mom. And so life kind of went back to normal for a little bit. We continued to travel, do this sort of things that we were doing prior to her departure. And I remember we were set to go on a cruise. I don't remember where, but I do remember that trip got canceled. And it got canceled because of an ER visit. My mom started to experience severe arm pain or shoulder pain. And at one point, she said it felt like her arm was being ripped off her body. Again, as a kid, you just don't know what's going on, so you're like, okay, I hope she gets through it, because she normally comes back when times are hard. And she got out of that ER visit. She was fine the next couple of days, and then she became really sick again. She was rushed to the hospital. Her kidneys were failing. Her liver had failed. And the doctors sincerely just did not know what was going on. They still to this day do not know what had happened. But they did say that it had come from her service in the last 2 years, and that was during her time in Afghanistan. And so just with that scare, and as a child, you don't really know what's going on, but you can hope for the best. I realized that God had allowed me to see my mom twice, come back from very near-death experiences. And it's given me a view on life that it is short. And in the same way that your families or military families serve, or at least the military personnel serve, so do their families. And so I thank God that my mom was able to see me grow up, to see me go to school for undergrad and for my master's, to see me cross the stage. And I also think that Lucky was a part of that as well. So thank you all so much, and thank you, Mom and Dad, for your service to our country.
Thank you, Courtney, and thank you to all of tonight's storytellers. I can't tell you how appreciative I am, and I'm sure all of you are too, that we got to take a little sneak peek, if not a double take, at personal stories close to your heart. So many thanks for all of you and for joining us, and I hope we can do this again. Have a good evening.